Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar about the role of AI engineers. And this is going to be our third webinar in a series. I'm going to share my screen and then I'm going to tell you about the previous two events and about what we are going to cover today. So previously, so this series is about the role of AI engineer. Who are the AI engineers, what they do, and what we covered already. We had this a day of AI engineer. This is where I explained my definition of who AI engineer is. So in my opinion, this is how I define AI engineer. AI engineer is a person who integrates AI into the product. Right? So this is who the AI engineer is. Then we talked about, it was last week, we talked about defining the AI engineering role, AI engineer role. And today we are going to talk about the interview process. And for that, we have this link that I will show you. AI engineer field guide. I sent you this link in email, but I will also add now it in the live chat. So in this link, everything that we talk about and everything that we have already talked about is in this link. Right? So for example, uh, if you go to these webinars, and we already had these two webinars, here we have Q&A from the webinar number one, or like a short summary. And then the same is with second one, and this is what we are going to do today. So this is the third topic. But in general, in this GitHub repo, so it's I want to make it very useful for you. In this repo, everything I find about the AI engineering role, I want to put there, which includes job descriptions, which includes interview questions, in general, interview process, um, learning paths like how do you become an AI engineer, and then what kind of portfolio project can you build to become an AI engineer and to get hired, things like that. So it's still work in progress. So because we will still have one more webinar where we'll talk about home assignments, and I plan to have even more where, for example, we talk about different aspects maybe of the interview, or I also want to talk about portfolios, the best portfolio projects for becoming an AI engineer. So please give it a star. Let me see how many of you did this. But yeah, so if you do this, if everyone on this call goes and gives this project a star, then maybe we will get this project to GitHub trending, and then this way more people will find out about this project. Right? Okay, so what we will do today. So today I'm going to talk about the interview process. I have some slides here. So these are the slides, the interview process. So I'm going to tell you what the interview process consists of, what kind of steps are there, and what you are evaluated on each of these steps, and what kind of questions are asked. So that's what we are going to cover today. That's what we are going to focus on today. And for that, all of that data is data driven. I, of course, also uh, took some things from my personal experience and from the stories that people I know shared with me, but it's largely data driven. And the data sources I used, if you attended the previous uh, webinar where we talked about the role of AI engineer, there I scraped a lot of data from this website, built in. So what I did is I just looked for the keyword AI engineer, see jobs, and I did this for Berlin, for Amsterdam, for London, for New York, and for Los Angeles. And this gave me around, like it was quite a lot, but after the duplication, it was around 800 positions. And this is what we used for analyzing the requirements for the role. So if you're interested in learning more about that, we have this data here. So the actual data, um, the actual positions are here in data row and data structured. So this is what I eventually analyzed. So files like this one. right? So the description, responsibilities, use cases, and skills, right? So this was in the previous webinar. But also these positions, these position descriptions turned out to be quite useful. And I also scraped one more month. So while previously it was only January, now I also added February. And also there was a request to extend the dataset to other geographies. So in addition to the US and Europe, I also added India. So I didn't focus on any specific city in India. I just, like here, you can select location, India. So I added basically this, like engineer India, like the entire country. So now there is 1,600 unique positions there. And interesting thing is sometimes these positions, these job descriptions, they describe not only the requirements, but they also show the process. They talk about the process, the interview process. So this is what I also used today to talk about, like how exactly we want to look at the process from both the views of the company, the point of view of the companies, and for that we have this job description data. And second is all the stories from people who interviewed recently and share the stories, share the questions they were asked, the process, how the interview was structured. So I look at this process from both angles, from the employers and from the employee, right? So for employers, I already shared the data with you. This is the data that I used. The stories, it was a little bit more difficult, so I had to look at Reddit, IC, Hacker News, look at personal blogs. So it was a lot of research. And also I tried to focus on very recent data. So 2026 and Q4 2025. Of course, sometimes I use data sets from a bit like data sources from a bit earlier days, like 2025 or 2024 even. But I try to focus mostly on the very recent data. And I want to show you how this data looks like. So if I go to now interviews, so this interviews, this folder is what we're going to focus on today. And by the way, before we continue, I want to ask you to, like, if you have any questions, there is this link that I shared with you. I'm going to share it one more time. So if you have any questions that you want to ask during the interview, please ask using this link. Right, it will be best if you just maybe take a picture of the QR code and ask. It will be a lot easier for me to cover these questions. And while I prepared a lot of materials, for me, it will be much more interesting to have a conversation with you and answer your questions, right? So all these things that I'm talking about, you can go to the repo and you can check this. But now you also have a chance to ask me something, and I'll be very happy to have a conversation with you, have a dialogue, and answer your question or attempt to answer your question and try to help you, right? And then even if I don't cover everything I planned for today, you can still go always to this repo and check this, right? So I want to encourage you to ask questions, but I wanted to talk about the data set, right? So this is how the data set looks like. In cannot retrieve last commit. Okay. So some job descriptions, like let's say this one. Some job descriptions they contain. So typically they contain the job description, right? But some of them contain the process. And so, for example, this company, Speechify. Okay, so this is not very descriptive. Let me check a different one. So watershed, I have no idea what is that. But yeah, so they have steps. 1, 2, introduction, conversation, skill, expertise assessment, virtual or in-person interview panel, right? So this is how it looks like. I'm trying to find maybe a more interesting example where they actually outline the steps. Okay. Like, I don't know, like, oh, this is good. Initial background, live coding challenge, system design, realistic work simulation, glass half. So I want to find this now, data row. So this is how the scraped data looked like. So there is a description about the role part, then responsibilities, again responsibilities, tech stack, compensation, why join. Oh, interview process. Here we go. Right. So in the job description, they describe the interview process, and this is what I use to extract this data. So now if I use this website, now we can actually see it there. So if I here interview process. So around 10%, maybe less of positions. I think it was less, but like it was still a significant amount of job descriptions where the companies actually outline the process, right? And this is what I used. So that's one part, right? And then another part I told you, like there are a lot of things I analyzed across many different domains, like Reddit discussion, Hacker News discussion, Twitter posts, personal blogs, YouTube videos. I collected all these things too. So they are, so first of all, this awesome MD. So here you will find a lot of interesting links that I used in the analysis. So like you'll find interview questions, you'll find architecture lessons, interview experiences. You can check it. Here, let me share it with you. Right, so this was one of the source, and then another source with actual questions from all these questions from all these websites that I found. I extracted questions and then I put them into one single file. So this file is called questions. And this is like a big list of questions. And then I organize these questions into like categories. So this is what we're going to look at. But anyways, I'm going back here to the interview process. So from these websites, from these job descriptions, and also from the personal stories of people who shared what they went through in interviews, we can see these following steps in the interview, right? So the first step is typically, and by the way, so it doesn't mean that all of them have 7 steps. It's just the steps that I see appearing in the data, right? So the first step is typically you talk to a recruiter, and this is like a short conversation, like who are you, what do you want, what do you know about our company, why do you want to work with us, what are your salary expectations, things like that. Huh? So then after that, or maybe before then, there is also a step 0, right, where they look at your CV, and if your CV is good, then they contact you, right? So then after that, there is a bunch of technical interviews. So in some cases, first you speak with a hiring manager and then with somebody like a senior engineer or the other way around. But typically there are some rounds where you need to do some sort of coding, right? And also answer some theoretical questions, right? So in technical interviews, you can also have theoretical questions. On hiring manager interviews, you can have theoretical questions, but typically you will have both, right? So the companies want to evaluate your technical skills like theory, how well you know theory, and how well you can program, right? And then there are also behavioral interviews. Behavioral interviews is interviews like tell me about a time when you disagreed with your colleague and stuff like that. Then take-home challenges. This is not something we are going to cover today. There is a separate webinar about that. And after take-home challenges, typically it's like you have a defense round, kind of, where you present this in front of a panel interview. So that's, yeah, you have a panel interview. And then finally you have the interview round with CEO, founder, whatever, right? Or it could be the hiring manager. But of course, as I said, this doesn't mean that every job process includes all the 7. Sometimes it's less. Sometimes it's like only 3. Sometimes it's even, I think there was one job description where they had the initial call and then a trial day where you work for 1 day for the company. And then after that, they decide if they want to hire you or not, right? So that's like a 2-step process, basically. But this is what we see in the data. And it actually makes sense, right? So some of them, like technical interview and hiring manager interview, could be one. Behavioral interview could be like separate or maybe merged with this one. But typically you see more or less this structure, right? So this is one example. So Dr. Leap is a company in Berlin, and so here, first they have recruiter interview, then feature building interview. I have no idea what it means, but I guess it's live coding. Then AI system design interview, behavioral interview. Well, they also have reference checks. Well, some of them do that, and you can get more examples here in this link. Right, so I included more examples like this Dr. Leap or Posthoc or Flowfuse, and there are even more. Like if you go to this interview and data, you have these job descriptions, and all these things are extracted from data where you have all these steps, right? And by the way, I will of course share the slides with you. Um, please keep asking questions. I'm very happy to see that we have these questions. So I will finish now the questions category, and not entire. So I'll just talk about the theory part probably, and then I'll take a look at your questions. For these questions, I think I already showed you the sources I used. So first of all, it was this awesome.md list. So this is one of the sources. Then I found quite a few Reddit threads. I find many Medium articles. I found many interview guides. I tried to keep this source data as much as possible. I think if I go to now interviews and data, you can see, for example, research experts. So I started doing this research by talking to Gemini, by talking to ChatGPT, and by talking to Grok. So all of them have some sort of research mode, and I started there. Like, for example, interview experiences, right? So I wanted to see how does it look like from people point of view, right? The people that experienced interviews recently, and I was always asking to focus on the very recent interviews. And for example, this is based on what people report in general. This is very similar. So I collected a lot of things like that, but then also wanted, in addition to this research, I wanted to have the actual data, right? The source data, and yeah, I think for me this was quite useful. So, like, I keep a lot of links here. There is nothing like for you, it's not really interesting. For me, it was just, okay, I want to get all these links from all these researches from like Gemini and so on. So then I can actually fetch this data myself and I can analyze it myself, right? So instead of relying on ChatGPT or Gemini to do the summary for me, I wanted to have the source, right? So then I can ask the questions I want, right? So the data stays there. That's why I kept it. For you, probably there is not so much value there, but I just wanted to show you the process I went through in order to arrive at these conclusions. And then I put all these questions from all the sources, I extracted all the questions, and then I put these questions here. So this is a big question dump. I also don't think this is going to be super useful for you, but I mean, you can check it. So this is already more prepared. And for me, what was the important part is for each questions, I wanted to have links, references. And also, what is quite important, I wanted to give more weight to stories from people who went through interviews rather than this SEO optimized blog posts from companies. Like, I think if I Google now AI engineering interview questions, I will probably find some. Okay, so this is actually useful, but we'll also get these questions from companies who might not necessarily actually, they just collected things. Sometimes we don't know how good the quality of these questions are, whether it was generated by AI, whether they actually did some research. I don't know. So I try to give more weights to not to these posts, but to posts that to reports of people, right? So, but still, sometimes there is value in. Okay, for this one, I don't know. I don't remember seeing this article before. Oh, this is machine learning, so this is not really our case. But yeah, I try to give more focus to actual stories, but sometimes like these resources are useful too. Okay, and this is like the list of questions. And then from this list, after that, I process this list and categorize it into theory, coding, and so on. And then I try to, first of all, look at how many references, like what is the support of this question, in how many references I saw this question. So for example, this one has 4 references, right? I was able to find 4 references that say, okay, this is a useful question. And then I also curated these questions myself. Sometimes I look at this question and I think like, okay, like would I really ask this question myself, or what are the chances that I see this question, right? Sometimes it seems like a trivia question rather than a proper interview question, right? So sometimes it's just these questions that I filter out, it feels like they just test your encyclopedic knowledge rather than whether you actually understand the topic. But then at the end, I arrived at these questions, right? So for each category, I try to keep it more focused. And then, yeah, so this was the process. And then I want to start with theory, right? So this is what we already see. So this is, let me close these things. So this is the theory file, right? So these are all these theoretical questions that people ask. You get asked on interviews, and these are like, what is an LLM or whatever? Like, how does an LLM work, or explain something? So these kind of knowledge-based questions, right? So you don't need to write any code. It's just to test whether you know this or not, right? Or whether you had experience with something or not, right? So typically, it's not always like you have a round that is specifically for that. So typically, it's these questions are asked as a part of something else. For example, when I was conducting interviews, I was usually doing the hiring manager interview round. And during the hiring manager interview round, I had project deep dive and I had theory questions, right? So it was one round, but 2 kind of categories, right? So this is what you would typically observe. Or maybe there is a system design discussion. We'll talk about system design too. And then after that, you may get asked some theory questions, right? But it's rarely just a standalone 1-hour discussion about theory, but it can happen. And I remember in my data science days, there were technical interviews that would test just my theory knowledge, right? So entire hour, I was grilled on hardcore machine learning questions. So it can happen that here with AI, you get these interview rounds too. So it's not super unlikely. And then I also categorize these questions into like practice oriented and also like this LLM practice, like how do LLMs work and things like that. There is a lot of focus on RAG, and in the previous webinar, we saw that RAG is the most common application of AI of Gen AI. So of course, it makes sense that since many companies use RAG, you get tested on knowing RAG. So then there are things like, okay, explain how RAG works, or when you use vector search, when you use text search, or let's say there is a system that needs to process PDFs, how do you do this? Right? So these are these RAG questions. Of course, there are also agent questions. Like what makes a system agentic, or how do agents decide which tools to use, and so on, right? So these questions focus the agentic part of Gen AI, right? And then, of course, in addition to that, you build RAG, you build agents, you need to test them, you need to evaluate them. So there are questions that cover that. Then you go to production, you need to monitor that. So there are questions that cover that. And then there's a bit more advanced, like how do you keep track of costs? How do you keep track of latency? I would say it belongs to monitoring, but I put them as a separate category because they are, from what I see, they are quite often coming up in the interviews, especially like this. How do you reduce token cost? We see that it's like 5 citations. And then sometimes, yeah, you get questions about safety, guardrails, and things like that. In the previous webinar, we also saw that often AI engineers are expected to have some machine learning knowledge, and they are being tested during the interviews about that too. So I didn't include here any machine learning specific questions. And actually, like when I was preparing these materials, it was very hard to me to filter out all these machine learning questions because most of the time when I was doing some research, and we saw it here too, like you look for AI engineering interview questions, but you find machine learning interview questions. So for search engines and for AI, the difference between machine learning and AI is not that large, right? That's why, yeah, I often saw that. But it's also a part of the interview process, so you need to, okay, where is it? You also might be required to know these parts. Not everywhere, but if historically this was a team that was doing ML, and now they're, in addition to that, do Gen AI, so then they will be interested in checking your machine learning knowledge. For that, I already have a repo with data science interviews. You can check that. But this is like, I would say, core AI engineering skills are these ones, right? So I'm excluding machine learning from here. So I would say that this is the core, like how do you build track? How do you build agents? How do you test and evaluate them? How do you monitor them? How to optimize them, right? But there are also more specialized topics because in some cases, companies are interested in fine-tuning models, training models, and there, then if they do this sort of work, and in the data, we saw that there are actually not so many companies that do that. I don't remember the number from the top of my head, but it's like, I don't know, 10, 20%, not more, right? So most companies don't need that. But there are companies who do this, and they might be testing you for these specialized topics, right? Like fine-tuning, for example. So for me, for example, yeah, I know what PEFT and LoRa is, but I have never used it in my life. So for me, it will be difficult to answer these questions. Right? But if I wanted to work at a company that needs these skills, I would, of course, need to prepare myself and maybe do a few pet projects before I interview with them to actually show, okay, maybe I don't have like production experience with these things, but at least I know what they are. Right? And also, and I found a lot of questions like that on the internet. I'm not sure how often. I don't think they are actually asked often, but yeah, I guess people like lists with theoretical questions. So these questions are like, how do transformers work? What is the self-attention mechanism? So they ask about internals of LLMs. And this could be only useful for companies that really need that, right? So if I'm a usual AI engineer and I want to work as a startup, and the startup is just making calls to OpenAI or to Anthropic, they don't really need this knowledge, right? So in many cases, you will not need that. But if you're going to interview with I don't know, OpenAI or somebody similar, then of course this could be important. And how to prepare? The best way to prepare, and I think here I mentioned how I would go about preparing for this one. So to me, the best way to prepare is to actually through practice. So you don't memorize these questions. This is a bad idea. Or at least for me, I am very bad at memorizing. But what really helps me learn things is practice. So for example, when I was preparing for my machine learning interviews, I was doing Kaggle competitions. And that was very, very helpful for interviews because on interviews, they would ask some things that I actually used in the competitions. Maybe I didn't use it at work, but I use it at competitions. And then because of my competition experience, I was able to answer these questions, right? And here is the same. It doesn't have to be a competition, but when you build some things, when you have pet projects, then you learn about many of these things, right? And then sometimes maybe for your pet project, you don't really need monitoring, but you think, yeah, this could be a useful skill for me to learn, right? And then you go, then you do monitoring, then you see all this like cost and latency stuff. Like even for your personal project, it might be not important, but as a way to learn the skills, because we see that this could be asked, especially if we talk about senior level engineers. This could be important, right? So then you think, okay, I want to learn that. How can I learn that by creating a project, right? And then you create a small project, 10, 20 hours. You don't invest more time in that. And you try to focus on this specific skill, right? And then this is how you learn. And this is how I learn. So this would be my recommendation to how to prepare that. Yeah. So this is the theory part. And before we continue to like other things, and we actually have quite a few of them. Did I not commit? I thought I committed because I think this is old. Okay. But anyways, I want to check your questions, right? And in the meantime, I'll quickly just open. So if somebody of you wants to ask questions, please do. In the meantime, I want to check quickly that I want to make sure I actually committed everything I wanted, because I saw outdated commits. I'll just call my commit. Cool. So now hopefully we should have fresh data. Oh, that's much better. Anyways, let's take a look of your questions. If you personally were preparing for an upcoming interview as an AI engineer, how would you prepare? What sites you would use, and what's your roadmap? Okay, so the roadmap really depends on your background, right? So you ask about me personally, so I can, using what we discussed today, right? So, or using these questions, I can take a look at these questions and then I can identify my knowledge gaps. But I wouldn't just base this, my roadmap for preparing, I wouldn't just base it on these questions, right? I would also look at companies that I am interested in. So I would try to pick up a few positions that I'm really interested in, maybe one domain and then some positions within this domain. And I would try to understand what I might be missing there to get hired, to be like, I don't know, top 5% candidate, right? So what am I really missing there? What kind of skills I need to have right now? What kind of skills I need to demonstrate in order to get hired for these companies, for these specific companies, right? And sometimes sometimes the answer is on the surface. You open the job description and it's clear. Sometimes it's not. And then what is really helpful, if this position is in the same city where you live, you network with people. So the simplest thing could be like you just find somebody in this company on LinkedIn and say, hey, you have very interesting profile. I see that you work at this company. I am interested in learning more about what you do and what your work is like. Do you mind grabbing breakfast or grabbing coffee before work or grabbing lunch? And then you can be flexible and can say, hey, I can come to your office. We can just talk, right? And then when somebody writes something like that to me, I don't usually, I'm usually fine with meeting because usually when this happens, people pay for my lunch, right? So then how can I say no to that? So then you can offer that like, hey, like, how about we get lunch? I want to ask you some questions, and then at the end you just pay for this person lunch. Right? So this could be one thing. Another thing, what you can do is there are meetups, and then you go there, you talk to people, you find people who already work in this area, and you ask them what they do at their work, and then you describe what is your profile, and you ask them for recommendation, what to learn. Right? This is what I would do. And then I also like doing things I personally like. Right? So if I want to set aside this question, like if I don't focus on getting hired for this specific company, I would just build things I enjoy building. And then while I'm doing this, I would learn new things. And this goes back to this Kaggle example I was giving, right? I gave, because I really liked taken part in Kaggle competitions, but also it turned out that this was a very useful way for me to learn skills that were not only useful for me at work, but also they proved extremely useful at passing job interviews. Right. So this is building things is one of these things. Right. So I would build things, and yeah, if there is a specific job interview I have with a specific company, I'll try to find out as much as possible about what kind of things they use. Also, checking the website of the company is helpful to understand what they are working on. Yeah, I would do something like that. But then I also mentioned that it depends on your background, right? Because maybe you are somebody who is coming from data science background and the company, and you want to work as an AI engineer. So for you, you need to focus on engineering skills, and it could be like not 1 week work, but like maybe 3-4 months work, right? So then you need to try to plan more strategically, like how do I go about picking up the skills in a more like strategic fashion, if you will, right? But you need to have a plan, right? So, and it applies to everything. So, for example, when I was preparing for a marathon, I read somewhere that having a plan is always better than having no plan, because every time, I don't know, you wake up, you have a plan and you know what to do. And if you don't have a plan, then you just procrastinate, right? So having a plan is helpful. So let's say if you're in this position right now, you are a data scientist and you want to become an AI engineer. I don't know, talk to ChatGPT, ask ChatGPT, tell it about yourself, tell it about the skills you want to pick up, and have a plan, and then stick to this plan. So I would do something like that. Do you think the AI engineer role will take over the industry and there will be less roles on data science and machine learning engineering? How do you see the future of the industry? Okay, that's an interesting question, and this question comes up in different forms in all the webinars I host. So this is really interesting that um, this thing comes up, right? So I don't think it will take over. So most of the jobs that they will not necessarily be about adding AI to the product. As I said at the beginning, so for me, the way I define the role of AI engineer, this is somebody who is integrating AI into the product that, I don't know, whatever product is there. So for me, this is the AI engineer. But also we need front-end engineers, we need back-end engineers, right? So they are not going anywhere. So I don't think AI engineers are going to be best people to do these kind of things. The same with ML engineers, right? So if we talk about data science and ML engineers, there are still many cases when we need traditional ML. Maybe, not maybe, I'm pretty sure the number of cases that where we need traditional ML now, because we have AI, is smaller, right? So there are many cases where AI is good and it doesn't make sense to use traditional ways of doing this. I don't know, named entity recognition, extraction, like everything that is NLP related. I don't want to go back and think about like all the approaches we used before, right? So for me, like LLM is the way. Right? But for some things like, I don't know, price prediction, like you have a car and you want to predict how much the car costs. Like you're not going to use an LLM for that. Like LLM will not give you an accurate answer. Or recommendation systems, right? So recommendation systems, while you can use an LLM to have decent recommendations, but it's going to be quite expensive on scale, right? So then you want to use like traditional things for that. Or search, right? Search has to be very fast. If your search is slow, then yeah, you lose money. It's for some companies. Like for Amazon, I think they measured it that even like a few millisecond delay already means they're losing a lot of money. So yeah, there are areas where data science and machine learning engineering is going to be still very, very relevant, and I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon, right? But how do I see the future of the industry? It's very hard to answer that question because these things change so quickly. But one thing is, from what I see, is that often AI engineer is a full stack role. And in addition to doing all these core AI things, they may also be doing like all the other things, right? So for example, let's take data science, right? If you give an AI engineer or any engineer access to all these AI assistants, they will probably do a decent job. So they will not be able to win a Kaggle competition, but they will do a decent model, right? And then the question is like, okay, if a data scientist can only build a model, then they are very easily replaceable with a software engineer with Cloud Code subscription, right? But data scientists are not only that, right? So they don't actually spend most of the time training models. They spend time talking to business, to product managers. They're trying to translate the requirements, the product requirements, or whatever the business requirements into machine learning terms. And this is not something that AI can easily replace, right? So there are some things that will not go away, but yeah, we will see. I think I don't really know where it's all going, but I'm really interested. It's really interesting to see how it will evolve. So maybe I'll answer this question now, and then we'll go back to the slides. How important do you think computer vision experience is currently for AI engineering, including image gen AI? Mm, So for AI engineering, I don't think it's very important. So there are companies who focus on computer vision, and this could be like things like image segmentation, other things. Like if we talk about image classification, then LLMs, they are pretty good at that. They might be expensive, right? If you just compare to a usual convolutional neural network, right? They might be expensive, but I'm pretty sure they have very decent quality, right? Mm. On the other hand, if we talk about image segmentation and other computer vision tasks, Gen AI, like general purpose AI models, like I don't know, Claude Opus or GPT 5.3, like they are not really there yet. So if the core product is it involves some sort of image computer vision, then yeah, they need to know computer vision. But if we talk about AI engineering, and if we talk about AI engineering in my definition of integrating AI into product, I don't think it's really necessary, right? Unless this is a company that whose focus is that, or the team whose focus is that, I don't think you will need to know things like that, right? So at least this is from I see from data. This is not something that comes up frequently in discussions. Okay, so this one I'll take later, but we will continue with the next part, which is coding. Right, so let's talk about coding. So coding is again, it could be a separate, completely separate step on the interview in the interview process. It could be integrated in some other interview processes. So, for example, in the hiring manager interview, I would do deep dive. I would ask theoretical questions, but I also would have include a coding part. But also, sometimes there is like a just completely separate coding round, and sometimes there are multiple. From what I see, from my personal experience, from what I know, and also the data supports that, there are two categories of coding rounds. The first one is what I call here implementation round, and the other one is algorithms round. So algorithm is you get a task, a simple problem from bleed code, like I don't know, reverse a string. Well, of course, this is too simple. I don't know, rotate a binary tree. So these sort of problems, right? And then you need to solve it in like 10, 15 minutes. So if you interview, I don't know, with Meta or Google or Amazon, they will have this sort of questions, right? Or a different category is these implementation rounds. So they are usually more, how to say, so while these ones, I don't know how relevant they are to the actual job, right? So you can argue that they are, you can argue that they are not. To me, like sometimes it's kind of stretch to say that if you know how to reverse a binary tree, you know how to integrate AI into the product, right? So I don't always see the connection. But these ones, implementation rounds, they are actually more relevant. So they are testing things that you as an AI engineer will actually do. And when I was interviewing, when I was hiring in the previous company where I worked, we were hiring ML engineers. Gen AI engineering wasn't really like a big thing back then. It was like 2.5 years ago, right? So like AI engineering is more like 2025 thing. Anyways, for ML engineering, we would ask questions to implement something that has nothing to do with ML engineering, right? It's just to see how good the ML engineer, how good the engineer is. Because you have ML engineer, you have data engineer, you have AI engineer. What is common between them is they are all engineers. And oftentimes, the job of this kind of engineers is not necessarily ML related or AI related. So you need to be able to implement general engineering things. And this is what we were testing with this. Like, so the task was to implement a web crawler. This is a very good problem because you don't really need to spend a lot of time introducing this because everyone more or less knows what a web crawler is. And then you say, okay, we have this website. Let's implement the crawler like a spider that is going across the website and collecting pages. And then like in half an hour or 40 minutes, you can implement quite a lot. And then you can see the thought process, how the person is writing code. So the goal is not to see how good the final implementation is, but more like general approach of a person to code, to engineering, to creating things, right? So how they structure the code, how the abstractions they create. And today, from what I see, many companies actually for this kind of tasks, they allow a usage of AI assistants. And of course, if you want to implement a website crawler and you have Claude Code, you can implement it in, I don't know, 3 minutes or 5 minutes, right? While previously you would need an entire hour for that. That's why these tasks, they can get larger, right? Compared to what we had before. And here they test you to, again, like not necessarily how you write code, but like what you look at in the written code. What is the abstractions you want? Like how do you steer the agent to go into the right way? Like how do you make sure there is no AI slope and things like that, right? But still, this is some companies allow AI assistance, some companies don't allow, and in general they test your engineering skills on something that is directly relevant for job, right? And then there is these algorithmic rounds that are less relevant, and I include like there were so many of them actually when I was preparing for these materials, and I didn't find it didn't make any sense to me to include all of them because you can easily go to lead code and find all these questions. But I wanted to share one my favorite interview question that tests this. And this is a rather simple question. So yeah, this one, it's called run length encoding. So you have a string of characters, AAA, BB, CCA, right? And then you need to encode it. So A appears 3 times, B appears 2 times, C appears 2 times, and A appears 1 time, right? So you have this A here and A here again. So basically what you need to do is you need to count how many times you see A, and then you see, okay, there is a new character, you reset the counter, the new character, you reset the counter, and then, so the implementation is rather trivial, but you need to implement you need to have a for loop, you need to have a few if statements. Yeah, so this was the task I was asking. And what I found is that people who can implement this can also implement more complex things. right? So there is no point in asking something more complex, right? But I wouldn't actually, if I wanted to give this task to a candidate, I wouldn't allow to use AI assistants, right? So here, I think it's still important to test, like on simple problems like that, how person thinks, right, and how they would solve it. So that's why for this, but this is a fairly simple problem, right? For more complex problems, where's my yeah, here. For more complex problems, maybe they allow using AI. I don't know. But from what I found from my personal experiments with using AI for solving problems like that, they are very good, right? So I can, like, you know, if you know this website called Forces. So this is a website with competitions. Okay, for me it's in Russian. Yeah, so these are the websites with competitions, and AI assistants were really, really good in these kind of problems, right? So I would not solve most of these problems, but AI assistants would, right? So mm, I don't know, but I heard some companies actually allow using AI assistants. So yeah, AI assistant coding. So here they look at how well you describe the problem in your own terms, in your own words to LLM, and to see if like how you interact with this. It's kind of similar to this one. It's just the scale is smaller. Right? And how to prepare? You solve lead code problems. You take a few of them, and like maybe for each category that you have, like I don't know, list sets, graphs, whatever, you pick a few and you try to solve it. Because it's very likely that you'll have these kind of problems, especially if you interview with big tech. I don't know, Google, Amazon. So I remember when I interviewed with Meta, they really grilled me on that one. With Amazon too. With Amazon, I think they are more, how to say, down to earth, not like they're more practical, at least in my experience. But Meta, they were just like giving me these abstract tasks, and I don't know what they were really evaluating, but it is what it is, right? Um, but it would help to just go check interview with a few companies to see what they ask before you start, because like this one is time investment, right? So it's not like you are going to sit and in one evening solve 75 lead code problems. Yeah, it requires a few months, right? And it requires commitment. And you want to first check if you actually need this. Maybe you can get away without like spending a lot of time on these things and spend more time on something. This is my experience more, in my personal opinion, something more meaningful, like building things, right? Not solving these things. But that said, in my experience, these things can still be there, right? Okay. Project deep dive. So this is my favorite section. And I already mentioned a few times that I was interviewing people. And then for me, this is what I was doing. So I was doing the hiring manager interview. So, and then I would start. So first I would introduce myself, and then I would ask the candidate to introduce themselves too. And then as they go, I would listen, and they say, um, if they start talking about what they do at work, it's good. So usually they mention at some point the project. If they don't, I explicitly ask, hey, can you tell me about the project you did or you just did, right? And then they start talking about the project and I go deep. Like I start asking, like they say, okay, I do this and then but why? Like what kind of problem you were solving, right? And then I would really dig deeper, and I would spend maybe half an hour on that. So usually it's just one project and I really want to understand everything about this project. And the reason for that is I want to understand like um, how much the person, the one I interview, how much they understand, how many, like how the decisions are made. If they are just executing tasks or they are driving the project. There is nothing wrong with just executing the task, right? And but maybe they are more senior, right? And then they are actually helping, like they are getting the tasks from product managers, they are decomposing these tasks into something smaller, they're handing these tasks to juniors, and then they are watching juniors. So when you do this project deep dive, you can see. So for me, it's a very good indicator of like seniority level and how involved the person is. Because especially these days, you can just ask Claude Code to implement these things and not really care about that. And while it's fine for some projects, I would actually say, oh, let's talk about a project that you actually implemented, right? So, or you were more involved in implementing these projects, right? Because I want to know about the trade-offs. I want to know about making difficult decisions, right? I want to know about situations where something went wrong, right, with this specific project, or like if they would start from scratch, how exactly they would do this, right? So if we do this. Like specifically, if we focus specifically on AI, right? So it could be like, I don't know, you build some rack, and then I would really ask you to explain me uh, where the data is, how do you access this data, how it's indexed, um, how do you keep it fresh, things like that, right? So, and here it's very good for you to have some projects to talk about, right? So if you have a bunch of pet projects, then you have automatically have things to talk about, right? And then I think I don't know how many of you have seen my previous uh, or webinars, right? Usually I suggest people like if you want to build a portfolio project, I suggest a way how to do this. So you pick a domain and you pick a few companies in this domain, a domain that you're interested, and you check their websites, tech blogs, and then from these tech blogs, you think, okay, what kind of projects I can implement, right? What kind of data I can use for that, and then you implement these projects. And when you interview with them, you have a lot of things to talk about. You can say, hey, like maybe you're just getting started with AI engineering, right? So you don't have real work experience, but you have this project, and you can say that. You can say that I am really interested in e-commerce, and I read your blog, I read blog of other companies, and there was this problem that I was really interested in, so I decided to re-implement this. I decided to implement it as a project, and then you explain this. And for me, it would be like a really strong signal that you are very interested in this thing, right? So I would suggest to do that, and then you automatically have things to talk about. And if you're not just letting AI execute that, right, you're taking an active part in driving the project, then you inevitably will have to make some decisions, right? What kind of search engine you use? Do you want to host it, or you want to use an in-memory one example, right? And then I want to talk about these trade-offs, right? So yeah, and so you need to like explain what is the business context, like why this problem is relevant. So for you, if it's a pet project, you can say, hey, I was just really interested in that, and I like this problem because, and then you explain, right? But if it's a work project, you can say, yeah, what is the problem that this particular thing is solving, right? Sometimes there could be situations where you cannot disclose what you work on. I interviewed people who say, sorry, I cannot speak about that. This is perfectly fine. I will not push, of course. But then we would talk about a hypothetical scenario. I would ask, what would you do if you needed to build this, right? And then we can talk about that. So this is also possible. So this is how. So this is based on like previous experience or hypothetical experience, but also from what I found in the data. Sometimes companies ask to prepare a presentation about that. So a few companies, I think notably it was Anthropic and OpenAI, maybe a few other companies, like bigger companies, they want you to think about the project and then prepare a presentation about that, right? So I have never experienced that, but from what I saw in data, in anecdotal evidence, this is not uncommon. So this can happen. Right. So let me see if for this one, what kind of questions we have. This project deep dive. Yeah, I think you can just go through this. But here, even though there are some questions, as I said, the way for me this conversation was flowing was like, hey, tell me about yourself. Tell me about the projects you were doing, and then I would pick one of these projects. Sometimes I would even ask the candidate, which of these projects you want to talk more, which of these projects you want to go deeper into details, right? And you want to discuss, right? And then they would select any project they want, and then we would go deep, right? So, and then I would ask some follow-up questions based on the discussion. So I never had a list of questions to ask. It's just whenever the discussion leads to, right? But for you, maybe if you didn't have experience of having this sort of interviews, could be useful to just see what kind of questions could be asked, right? But here, like how to prepare, you just need to select a project. Not just, but you need to select a project, and then you need to implement this project, and you need to do it a few times, and then you have things to talk about, right? And then you go to interviews, and then sometimes they can ask you a question that you don't know the answer to, and then you do a retrospective at the end. You think, okay, how would I answer next time when I had this question, right? And this is how you build the intuition, right? So I wouldn't really, grill myself on preparing for this kind of questions and memorizing them. I would just focus on building things, and then the rest will come. And then you do in the interviews, and then you get feedback from these interviews. Usually, like even if they don't give you written feedback, you just understand, okay, they asked me this, I couldn't answer that. Like, how can I be better next time? Okay, system design, next type. So in deep dive, we usually talk about projects that you already built, but system design is about projects that hypothetical scenarios, how you would go about building the project, right? Let's say, I don't know, we can take one of the examples here. Design an AI chatbot, or design a document Q&A assistant, or design an AI copilot, right? So they give you these scenarios, and then typically you have some sort of virtual board, or if it's on site, you have a whiteboard, and you start drawing things. You say, okay, yeah, we have rack here. So this is the user. The user is making a request to this front end. The front end is making the request to here. Like we need rack, so we have this document database. It could be like vector database. I don't know, whatever. And then this is how the data goes to the database. So you describe all these things. And you don't necessarily jump into the description like I did right now. You can also ask some questions, and you can say, hey, like how many documents are we talking about, right? How often these documents update? Things like that, things that you think are relevant. Or like if we talk about AI Copilot, like how exactly our users are going to use it? Is it like a CLI application, or it's integrated into the website? So based on that, it's very important to ask these questions, because based on that, the design of your system could be very different. And here, when it comes to the AI chatbot, most of us know how chatbot looks like, but still, I would ask a few clarifying questions, right? Yeah, so there are actually more of them. I just selected a few. So there, if you go to this questions.md, you'll find more. I don't think it makes sense to actually, as I said again, grill on that. Just maybe pick a few and then try to think how would you go about implementing them if you needed to create this from scratch, right? And then this will give you some ideas. It will not be the ideal answer, but again, practice makes perfect. So then as you interview more, you will get more practice answering these questions. And when you work, you inevitably will have to make some design decisions. So like this is a thing you don't necessarily need to prepare for proactively. I mean, like the preparation comes from actually designing systems that work or working on your pet projects. And I also want to add that this is something that is more for senior AI engineers. So like the level of seniority is like senior plus. If you are just getting started with your career, or maybe, I don't know, you're switching from the research background, I don't think they will actually ask you anything like in depth. They can say, hey, like, how would you do this? And then you can describe in simple terms, and this is already fine, right? So it doesn't have to be like distributed handling, I don't know, 1 million requests per second or whatever, right? So yeah, you can keep things simple, but if you aim for senior roles, then of course you need to be prepared. But typically the way you prepare is by doing some things like that at work already. Yeah. And but what is interesting, so this AI system design is a thing in general, because we have ML system design, we have software engineering system design. So it's also interesting to compare them a little. So I did some comparison here. So in case of ML system design, they ask you to design a recommender system. right? Or fraud detection system. In case of AI, it could be something. So basically, in one case you use AI, in another case you use ML. That's why the rectangulars you draw on the board could have different names, right? But at the end, it's not drastically different, right? But it could be a bit different with, like, I don't know, system design, because usual system design. Because for AI system design, also for ML system design, you also need to think about things like how do I evaluate it, how do I test it, like A/B tests and stuff, right? Or collecting feedback. While for system design, you really focus more on distributed system and this kind of stuff, right? And also, when I was doing some research for AI system design, I would quite often come across things like this, like design a scalable image generation pipeline for millions of users, right? I don't think that this is a proper AI system design question. It's more like, let's say I'm a software engineer and I interview for OpenAI, so they can ask me this. But if I am an AI engineer and my role is to use existing services, then I probably will not need this, right? So it really, in most companies, they don't have these sort of problems, right? So then you would get different sort of questions like design for detections. I think this is actually more a machine learning question than AI question. I should probably move it. But like design a system that lets doctors automatically send billing info to users based on patient notes. So this could be like a very good AI system. And as I said, the way you prepare by doing things. Yeah, and the format is you first ask clarifying questions, then you draw some things, you always communicate with the interviewer, you ask questions, you ask what they think about this. Sometimes they would say, I don't know, tell me, right? And then you think out loud, but like there should be some sort of dialogue. And then they can ask you, hey, like, how about this? How would you go about, like, I don't know, monitoring? And then you would describe it in more details, right? So there could be some deep dive. Okay. And for that, what is very helpful, in addition to building things yourself, is reading blogs. And I have a very funny story about that. So a friend of mine, he's a search engineer, and he was interviewing with one of the companies who was doing search, and they asked him about like, how would you design search for us? And he would reply, and they said, oh, this is really cool. This is how we actually did this. And he was like, yes, I know, because I read it in your blog. And he basically recited what they wrote in the blog. But yeah, so this could be a very useful source of, how to say, AI design knowledge, right? Or in general, system design knowledge. That companies often describe how exactly they build systems. So when you read this, yeah, you will learn things. And also when you attend conferences, when you attend technical talks, they often don't just describe the business problem, but they also talk about infrastructure, like how exactly what is the data flow and so on. Okay, so what next thing? So how many more questions do we have? Behavioral. Yeah, I think that's the last one, and then we can spend more time on questions. So behavioral is like, tell me about a time you mentored a colleague. Tell me about a time you had a conflict. Tell me about a time you disagreed with your manager, right? So these, most of them have nothing to do with AI, right? So this is not specific to AI at all, but you are very likely going to get them, especially if you interview with companies like Amazon. So Amazon is really obsessed on this kind of questions. So I remember I had like on site, it was 6 or 7 interviews. I don't remember, 6. And in every interview, the first part was coding, the second part was behavioral. So they are really, how to say, invested in this kind of format because they look for culture fit and so on. So here, there are still, I found a few examples where they are AI specific actually, but most of them, they are just general behavioral questions. So if you Google or if you ask ChatGPT, hey, what are common behavioral questions, you will find this list. When I was looking actually for AI engineering behavioral questions, but all the questions that were coming up were pretty much general, right? There are a few specific ones like how do you stay up to date with latest development, what side projects have you built, what recent papers caught your attention, describe a project that didn't go as planned or where your solution failed, right? So this is the kind of questions you get. And then, of course, there is like more conflict, leadership, technical decision making, failure, and so on. So how to prepare? So this is the interesting part. So this I can tell you how I prepared for all these Amazon interviews, which was very useful, not just Amazon, for pretty much every other behavioral interview I had. So every company typically has some sort of values. So in case of Amazon, it's called leadership principles. So this is for Amazon. They say, yeah, it's customer obsession, ownership, invent and simplify, and then explain. They explain what they actually mean, like you're right, learn and be curious. So they explain what it means, and then for every value, what you can do is you can come up with 2-3 stories where you show how you demonstrated this value. So typically you see the recommendation to use this STAR format, situation, task, action, result. I was using that too when I was preparing on the piece of paper, but of course during the interview you don't remember like STAR S stands for what. You just go with the flow and talk, right? And this is fine, right? But when you prepare, it's helpful that you follow some format, right? So then when you actually speak, at least some structure will stay there, right? So it's not like you are just all over the place, but there is some storytelling component in that, right? But this is how I did. So I selected Amazon. I went through their leadership principles. For each of the principles, I would come up with a few stories that demonstrate, that show how I demonstrated this principle. And what I found out that in all the other interviews I had, I was asked similar things, right? And the values that companies have, they're pretty similar. And for example, I live in Berlin. In Berlin, there is this company called Zalando. I don't remember back then. I don't know. Maybe now it's different. Back then, they didn't have a public page with their values, but all the behavioral questions they were asking were pretty similar to ones at Amazon, right? So at the end, yeah, if you aim at working in a specific company, try to see their values, try to come up with scenarios. If they don't have this publicly available, then I would suggest going with Amazon leadership principles and then try to come up with some stories. And it will not require a lot of time if you already worked, if you already have some experience. So this is not AI specific at all. And like even if you're a student and you haven't worked, right, you collaborated with your peers at university, right? And here, and you're implementing some things, I assume, right? So just based on that, you can already come up with many stories, like how you helped somebody, right? Or how you disagreed with your teacher. And the same if you're changing career, right? So if you're changing career, it's even easier because let's say you work as a backend developer now and you want to work as an AI engineer, right? So then you already should have a lot of stories. Well, of course, you need to sit down and think about these stories. But I'm pretty sure that if you do this exercise and sit down after 1 or 2 evenings, you'll have a lot of materials. You just need to sit down. And then if it's difficult for you to come up with this, talk to ChatGPT, ask ChatGPT to be your interviewer and to ask you questions. And then at the end, since you have this conversation, you can form stories based on that. Okay, I think that's behavioral. And then take home assignments. We'll talk about them later. So what I want to do in the next webinar, I actually want to make it a workshop. So I want to talk about different home assignments. So I analyzed GitHub projects from people whose task was to do some take-home assignment, right? And I want to understand what is usually asked. We don't necessarily need to look at their solution because we don't always know whether they passed the interview or not, but I just want to understand what the task was. And we together will attempt to implement one of them. So that's the plan for the next webinar. You can find the link here in the webinars folder, here, number 4. Here you click on Maven and you can sign up. And yeah, I specifically try to focus on very fresh submissions, something 2020 in 2026 and late 2025. Okay, what else we have? Yeah, I think what I'll do now is we can spend the rest of the time we have here answering your questions, because this, where is it? Did I already close it? Yeah, I think it's here. Like, it has a lot of materials, and I would suggest you to go through things. You will find many interesting things like in role, in interviews. So learning path portfolio is still work in progress. Right? I want to perhaps have separate webinars about that, like how do you exactly go about building a portfolio, or how do you actually transition. So we can talk about this later. But I think you can already find a few interesting things there. But yeah, want to focus on Q&A for the rest of the time. How much time do we actually have? Yeah, well, I can maybe do it for 20 minutes. Or maybe I finish earlier. So regarding the example take-home exercises in this repo, how can we use them to prepare for our future take-home assignments? Well, I think that it's pretty straightforward if you ask me. So you take a look at this assignment and you think, okay, I find this interesting, I want to implement this, you go and implement this. I wouldn't look at the code because you don't really know whether the candidates pass and how much experience they already have. Maybe they just generated all this code using AI, right? So I would suggest not to look at the code, but I would look at the README. And if you think that this is a good README, you try to, dissect, understand why do you think this README is good? What did they include in the README? Right. So when you look at these examples, you can ask yourself, I really like it. Like, how can I make something similar? Right. And then, okay, I like it because they have this structure, because they have demo, because they explain things. Right. So then you can think, okay, like when I create my own project, my own home assignment, then I want to make sure I cover these things, right? And if you have this written down, then you can just ask your AI agent AI assistant to create it in this structure. But you need to think about the structure, because if you just say, "Hey, Claude, create me README," I don't expect anything stellar coming out of that. But yeah, I would just go through this, see if anything picks up your interest, and then try to solve it. Right? Check the README. But for me, this is more like to understand what companies ask. And what I found out that most of the time it's RAG and it's parsing PDF documents, right? And then even if you don't necessarily do one of those take-home assignments exercises in the repo, you can think of your personal project where you can pick up the skills. So for example, recently, and this is what I did for the course, we can talk about the course later, I thought it would be cool to take an old mathematics book and try to extract as much information from this book as possible. Because we have formulas there, we have images there, like all these figures, illustrations. How can I do my RAG on top of this data, and how can I preserve this data? Like, how can I describe the illustrations? And this is why I really like this project. Right? So maybe there are some ideas that you have like that. If not, what you can do is maybe you took a blood sample recently and you got a report. So try to make a project where you parse this report, because I saw a few examples where that was the task. And I think it's, on one hand, it's pretty straightforward, but there are many nuances. Right? So how exactly you do this? Because on one hand, you turn this PDF image, you send it to OpenAI. OpenAI gives you back the answers. But like, how exactly do you do this? Right? So how do you structure your output? Like, what kind of fields are there? So this is, I think this is a very good exercise, and it's likely that you'll have something like that in your home take-home exercises. So yeah, check it, see if you can spot any patterns, see if you like anything, try to implement and look at README. Should I target specific companies and build projects around the specific problems they are solving, or I build projects around common patterns and mass apply? Well, I think I already mentioned that in my personal opinion, it's better if you focus on a specific domain. Because, like, what do you mean common pattern, right? So, what exactly is that? It's just brag about what? I don't know. Like, it's hard to think like what the common pattern is. But if you narrow down it to a particular domain, let's say I want to work in healthcare, or I want to work in I don't know, two-sided marketplace like I don't know, Uber or something, right? And then you can also talk to ChatGPT or Gemini, like, okay, I'm interested in this domain. What are the companies that work in this domain? What are the tech blogs? What kind of problems they talk about on those tech blogs? And then from these problems, I would try to pick something that I like, and then I would try to solve it. And then for that, you will need to think, okay, like, okay, I want to solve this problem, but where do I get data from? Right? Okay, and then you think, I can scrape this data, or I can generate this data, I can find this data somewhere. And then you will need to think about like this entire thing end to end. And I think this makes it interesting because, first of all, maybe you want to work at these specific companies, right? And then you have things to talk about, and I talked about this already. So yeah, I would go about that this way because it helps you to focus, and also when you have this focus, it's easier for you make decisions. It's easier to find information. When mass applying is, yeah, you kind of lose focus. If it makes sense, right? Another way would be to focus on what you like. Maybe you have some problems. Problems, I mean, that there is something that you don't like in the way you do things, and you think that you can automate these things with AI, right? So then you are your own user. So you're not doing this for a company, you're doing it for yourself. But as a result, you have a portfolio project that you can talk about, right? And then in this case, it would be like maybe not even a common pattern or not a problem that companies have, but you will have a solution to your particular problem, which is already a win. And second, this could be used as a portfolio project. And I always like talking to people who have these sorts of projects because for them, they're really invested into solving this problem, right? They know it well, so they are kind of domain experts, right? And then they can talk really about all these decisions they made, right? Because they do it for themselves, and then they can make decisions at some point, like different trade-offs. While when it's for some general common pattern, then maybe for you it's a bit more difficult because you're not really into this domain, right? So I would suggest to focus, but above all, like if you try to find a problem that you can solve with AI in your own workflow, it's even better. How can you overcome the lack of experience with AI in production? Real world projects help build only theory and hands-on experience. What do you suggest? Yeah, so this is true. Um, But still, try to add monitoring. Try to think about costs. Try to think like, what if users start using it? Try to deploy something. Try to publish. So let's say here I talked about this mathematical extracting things from mathematical book. So how about let's say you work on a similar project. So how about you make it available on Amazon? I mean AWS, right? And then you ask your friends to experiment with this, right? And then what you do is you set up a monitoring system, so then you can see how exactly they use it, and then you collect logs, and then you can build your evaluation system, right? It will not be at scale, right? So because it may be like, I don't know, two of your friends agree to do this. Not it will not be I don't know, 1,000 requests per second, but still it's better than nothing, right? So I think I would aim at getting this better than nothing. I don't know if it's a good thing, but like it's still kind of, even though it's a pet project, it's still kind of closer to production than a project in a Jupyter Notebook, right? So try to go from Jupyter Notebook to a deployed application, right? So try to deploy, in order to deploy, then maybe you'll need to set up CI/CD. So try that, right? And it's like CI/CD. If we talk about CI/CD, it's free. Like if you use GitHub, you have actions that are free. And then maybe for serving, you use something like maybe you get a cheap instance, or maybe you use serverless. I don't know. There are so many ways you can do this. Or maybe you can use Streamlit, and deploying to Streamlit is free. Or Render is also free at some point. Like I think, and when it becomes paid, it's like $15-20 per month. Also not super difficult, super expensive. So I think you get where I am going with this, right? So even though you don't really have experience in real production, you can be closer to some production, right? So you can try to set up the CI/CD, you can set up dev production environment, right? Even though maybe the user is just you, right? Because you want to get experience, and then you want to. It doesn't mean that what you will build will be necessarily right, necessarily how people do this in the industry. But at least you will try to do it yourself, right? So this is really cool. And then when you get your job, then you will actually learn from your colleagues what is the proper way of doing this. And of course, like if you can build a pet project that is used by other people, and then it's not just I don't know, you and two of your friends, but I don't know, maybe you have like 20, 30 users per day. Then it's really cool, right? So who knows? Maybe you can do something like that. Can juniors apply for senior AI engineering roles after building a couple of interesting projects given the uncertainty AI creates for junior roles? I mean, you of course can, but the question is whether they will consider you. Chances are pretty slim. So when people want senior, they don't want juniors, right? Um, but there is some logic in that. So what can happen is maybe they have a junior role, but it's not public yet, right? So when you apply for a senior role, um, maybe they will see, okay, like we don't have a junior role yet, but this looks like a promising candidate. So how about we speak with them? But chances are pretty slim, and most of the time you would not simply pass the automated screening system. That said, like I mean, applying doesn't harm you. And let's say if your goal is to apply for 5 positions per day, and you found 3 junior positions, but the remaining 2 are not juniors, it's better to apply to them rather than not, right? So in this sense, there is no harm. And but what you certainly should do is apply for middle level positions that say just AI engineer without mentioning junior or senior. Because, like, frankly, how many junior positions will you find? Probably not so many. So, like, definitely apply for middle level. Senior, if you don't find anything else, but yeah, don't expect to hear anything in return. And it can also be not annoying, but like if I want to hire a senior, like I would not just look at junior positions, and it's like at the end could be like wasting their time. But since they have AI screening, they probably will not even see this. But that said, yeah, try. How important are observability and login tracking related topics for junior positions? So in my course, I teach this. So even if you're junior, I think this is important. First of all, because this is what I saw in data, and this is what some people write, that now these days many people can build RAG because it's for a small scale problem. You will need to spend some time, right? You will need to spend maybe a month or two to learn this topic, but then at the end, yeah, it's you can have a working prototype after some time, right? But what can make you, how to say, stand out from others is if you add this. And observability. So in my course, observability actually is the easiest chapter Because if you use, so what I teach is Pydantic AI. So we use Pydantic AI as the agentic framework. And Pydantic AI has a very good integration with Logfire. Right? So Logfire is the platform we use. And this is really, really, really simple to start sending logs to Logfire if you use Pydantic AI. Right? So there's no reason not to use it because all it takes is you sign up for. I'm not affiliated with Pydantic AI in any way, but I genuinely like their product. Right? So you just sign up for this, you get your key, and you start sending logs. For personal projects, it's free forever. It would really be difficult for you to hit the quota numbers. Yeah, so there is no, like if you ask me, there is no excuse like not to use it because it's super simple, right? So it's you add literally, so you need an API key and 3 or 2 lines of code, and that's it. You start sending logs. So you should definitely do this. And then, yeah, this will make you stand out from people who do not do this. And this is not that difficult, right? So other topics that are more complicated is testing and evaluation. So there in the course, I spent much more time on that because they are more difficult. Well, when it comes to observability, login tracking, like you should definitely do this. But also evaluation. So evaluation is very important, and evaluation makes the difference between an agent that is working and agent that is not working. So I highly suggest to invest time in learning these things too. And since we're talking about the course, I can briefly mention it. So I teach a course about AI engineering, and that's why for me it's interesting to know about all the things that are happening, what kind of questions are asked, so I can adjust the course to the reality out there. That's why I'm also very interested in the very fresh data, recent trends. And there we learn how to build RAG, how to build agents, how to test agents, how to evaluate agents, and how to monitor your agents. And it's very project driven. So we focus on building there. And even though it says 8 plus, it's actually a few more because every homework is a small mini project. So yeah, if you're interested in learning more, you can check the course. There's also a discount code somewhere, but I'll send it by email. Yeah, but regardless of whether you take the course or not, so in my course, I think that these are very important things to teach. That's why I include it. But if you're not taking the course, I recommend that you learn about tests, you learn about observability, and you learn about evaluation, because these are very important topics. And this will also set you apart from other people that do not necessarily have it. Of course, you will need to invest more time into learning these things, but it's definitely worth it. Okay, so we are actually 5 minutes already over. What I will do is I'll probably spend 5-10 more minutes on answering the questions, and then for the rest of the questions, I will take them offline. I will answer them, and you will see them in these webinars. So in this number 3, I will include Q&A section, just like we have here. Here we have this Q&A during the webinar, Q&A after. So I will just take the transcript of this video and my answers, and then ask AI to put all these things together. So don't worry, I'll take care of all the questions. For now, maybe just 2 more. Do you have stats about jobs which require production experience with LLMs versus positions where personal educational projects are enough? No, I do not have this kind of stats, but from what we saw last week is many positions require production experience. But what I mean by production experience, let me say they require engineering experience. They don't say whether it's production or personal educational, but they say, we want you to be able to write tests. We want you to be able to do CI/CD. We want you to be able to do monitoring, right? Which is logical. And this is it doesn't require like production at scale. You can learn these things while implementing a pet project or implementing a course project. Because in my course, the students, the course participants, they have to do this. Like if they don't do this, they simply do not graduate. They don't get a certificate at the end. So yeah, while it's not production experience, it's it's better than nothing, first of all. And in many cases, could be good enough, right? Because maybe it's a startup and they don't really have a lot of scale. They just need an enthusiastic person who can do this, right? And then, yeah. Or maybe it's, yeah, a startup, there is already somebody experienced, but they need help so they can hire you, right? So maybe they, because in startups, they don't have a lot of money. Senior people ask for more money. So the solution is to hire juniors, right? Of course, they could be ambitious and say, "Hey, we want senior, but we can only pay junior salary." But yeah, good luck to them finding people. If one is yet to have work experience in AI engineering, what is best way to deal with situation where you may need a referral? Okay, I think I talked about networking a bit, right? So let's say there is a company you're interested in working on. You already did some research. You already checked their tech blog. You see what kind of problems they work on, and then you can find an AI engineer who works at this specific company, right? So what you can write, what you can do is write them saying, "Hey, like I'm really interested in what you do. Can we grab coffee or something like that?" Right? And then you tell them about yourself, you ask them about them, you ask them how their day looks like, what kind of problems they solve. You talk about your pet projects, and then you say, "Hey, like, do you think I saw this position, maybe you could refer me?" Some of them might do this. Sometimes, if I just get a cold message in LinkedIn, somebody says, "Hey, like, can you refer me?" And I don't know this person, the answer is probably no. I cannot, unless I look at their profile in GitHub or LinkedIn and GitHub, and I see that they have a really good profile. I would say yeah, but most people who write me, there is nothing special about them, right? And so if you just get a cold message like that, "Hey, refer me," I would probably not do this. On the other hand, if I already established contact with a person and I learn something about them, I see that they are passionate, and they are also interested they're interested in my experience, right? So people usually like when other people are interested in them. I'm not an exception, right? So then, if at the end they say, "Hey, like, I was thinking if you can refer me," then why would I say no, right? So this is one thing. How you can do this. Another thing is you go to meetups, you talk to people, you ask about them, you ask questions, and then you can also tell about yourself. And then you can ask, "Hey, do you know if your company is hiring? Maybe you can refer me." So some people will do this if they're actually hiring, right? Because let's say I work and at work I have a referral program. What usually happens if I refer somebody and this person is hired, I get money, right? And if I refer somebody and this person is not hired, there is no harm, right? So for me, I always have an incentive to refer somebody because there is no harm. But I also don't want to refer complete strangers because I want to make sure that, okay, they have at least a good profile, right? So I'm sure that if, I don't know, a recruiter or a hiring manager looks at this, they will not come to me and saying, "Hey, like, oh, why do you send me these people? Please stop doing this," right? So I want to be certain that at least when they look at this, they will consider interviewing the person, right? So yeah, this is how you do this. Okay, let's see how much time we have. I think I can take one more. Do you need to know how to build a RAG system before learning to build an agentic system? I.e., is RAG a prerequisite? In my opinion, yes. I think you do need to do this because based on the data, RAG is still the most common pattern. And then you can easily go from RAG to agent because you still need to be able to access some sort of internal knowledge base, be it through an agent, through a tool, or be it like traditional RAG. So I think starting with RAG is useful. What is more, in many cases, the problem can be solved with just RAG. You don't need an agent, right? So you just look up some data, and based on that, you make some decision, and that's it, right? It's not, maybe it's not even a chatbot, but like in some cases. And I can give you an example. So we have in Data Talks Club, we have this FAQ document, right? So for the courses we have, there are frequently asked questions, and the question could be like, okay, my computer is frozen. Okay, how do you sign up? When is the next cohort? And there are some more technical questions, right? Why learn traditional ML if LLM can do it for me? Okay, that's interesting. Anyways, then there is a way to contribute to this FAQ. So the way you do this is you go to this FAQ proposal form, you fill it in, and after you click create, what happens is, well, we can see, we can open an issue. So do I need to generate the agent's MD file for codecs and DLT? Right? So somebody created an issue, and then there is a GitHub action thing that say, okay, yeah. So there is, for your issue, a new PR was created. And then this is the PR, right? And then in this PR, we can see that it created a new record with this question and the description. What happens under the hood is there is a GitHub action. Okay, maybe I'll find the code. But basically what happens under the hood is RAG. So there is just RAG. There is no agentic stuff. We have a database. The database is actually all these questions. So all these questions are indexed. Then based on this issue that people create, we do a lookup and we see, does search return something? And if the search returns something, is it a duplicate of an existing thing? Or we can say if it's a duplicate, we just close the issue. If it's not a duplicate, but we already have a record about that, then we can merge them. But if it's something entirely new, then we can create a completely new. So in some cases it's new. You can see in all these cases it's new, but it can also be an update, right? And this is simple RAG, and you don't really need an agent there, right? And there are so many cases where you don't need an agent. Simple RAG will work. So I would really suggest here to start with RAG and then learn about agents, because this is a very, still today, very common, the most common use case of using AI. And then when you build agents, you also can use search as a tool. So you still need RAG. Maybe you just don't use it directly as in plain in the traditional RAG, but your agent can use RAG. And then, of course, there are situations when you build an agent and it doesn't need RAG. But I think there are more situations where it does, right? So I would suggest you do this. And in fact, that this is exactly how I approach it. So first, where is it? So first we actually focus on, okay, like how do LLMs work, how you interact with LLMs, and then we build RAG. So this is the first application of AI that I teach. So we do RAG, then we see how to structure it, and only after that. So I give a few examples of how to use RAG in different scenarios, right? Like FAQ assistant or YouTube transcripts. This book example I was talking about, right? And only then I go to agentic stuff, right? So I think it's important to learn these basics. But again, up to you, right? So if there is an application that you want to work on and it solves your particular problem and you don't need RAG for that, then you can skip, right? But if your question is like, okay, I want to prepare for the AI engineering position, do I need to learn about RAG? My answer is yes. Okay, well, I can quickly take this one because it's not long. In coding part of the interviews, is it allowed to use AI assisted coding? It really depends. So in some cases it is, in some cases it's not. Usually they will tell you if you need this. Okay. So I saw that I have some things in chat. So I don't know. Sorry, I wasn't monitoring chat. So if there were some questions, yeah, you can find a way to ask me these questions. But yeah, this is being recorded. Okay. For the rest of the questions, as I said, I'll record an answer, and then I will share this answers and all the materials from today sometime this week or maybe next week. I don't know. But don't forget to sign up for the next one. And if you're interested in learning about AI engineering, I have a course for that. I'll send you a discount code. It works for maybe a few more days, but you'll find also this in the GitHub repo. Like if you just scroll all the way down, there's the link, the discount code. We start in April. Okay, I think that's it for today. If you have more ideas what I can cover about the role, please let me know. I already have some ideas for new webinars, but if you have a very specific idea and I like this idea, I'll be up to cover that. Okay, thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your day. And for me, it's almost 7 p.m., so I go rest. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.